This episode may contain content of a graphic nature, including descriptions of physical and sexual violence against adults, children, and animals. Listener discretion is advised. Hi everyone, I'm Talia.
And I'm Tanya.
And together we are Crimes and Consequences, a true crime podcast. Everybody, and welcome to Crimes and Consequences. My name is Talia, and this is my very beautiful co-host, Tanya.
Hello.
And we want to thank you guys all for joining us. If you haven't done so already, hit the subscribe, like, follow button. We're now on our own channel. It's on YouTube. I think it's at Crimes and Consequences, but I'm having a hard time finding it myself. But eventually, if you type in Crimes and Consequences, you will see where you can subscribe and you can see the video of this. But otherwise, you can listen on your favorite podcast. And with that being said, I don't think I need any more introductions. Do you?
No, I don't think so. I think we can get to it.
So this story, I dove in deep. There's so much I could say that I'm probably going to leave out because it's first of all, it's really tragic. It's pretty gruesome. And it does have children involved.
Oh, children victims.
And yes, and animals. And it's just bad.
Yeah,
I'm just
so
gonna
trigger
say
warning.
It's fucking bad. So, but if you like true crime, it's a very interesting story. So
and
with that.
we like true crime.
And we like true crime.
So
with that, we're going to get started.
All right, let's
put on my little reading glasses.
Let's go for it.
I'm going to tell you about John and Nancy Newman. They were married in Twin Falls, Idaho, on January 5th, 1975. 3 years later, their first daughter, her name is Melissa, was born on September 22nd, 1978. Then they had a second daughter. Her name was Angie. And that she was born on August 17th of 1983. They're living in Idaho, and John gets a job in May of 1985 in Anchorage, Alaska.
Oh, that's a big move.
So he moves first, and then Nancy and the girls follow in July of that year. So they're a few months apart. Nancy's sister, her name was Cheryl. Her name was Cheryl Chapman. She lived there. So they had some family.
Oh, that's
there.
nice. Yeah.
So that makes it better. And Nancy ended up getting a job where Cheryl worked. They were both waitresses at a place called Gwenny's. And Gwenny's was a popular place in Anchorage. It was a restaurant, and it's still in business today. Nancy's husband, John, he worked as a heavy equipment operator for Mark Air, this company. But then he got an injury from a forklift. I believe it kind of ran him over a little bit.
A little bit.
I mean, he wasn't killed, but he was seriously injured. So workers' compensation, he filed a claim, and he got paid to retrain as a locksmith.
Oh.
And this was kind of interesting to me because he got paid to spend 2 months in California learning how to be a locksmith.
Wow.
So I don't think he's just doing
Is this
regular.
A state program?
It is through the state. So I don't think he's just doing a regular there's
no.
I think it's different locks than what.
Yeah, right. Like some
be.
Specialty locksmith.
Yeah, I don't know. So the story that I'm going to tell you takes place 3 days before John was to return home from California.
No.
This is not a good story. In March of 1987, while John was away in the training program, Nancy was staying, obviously, in Anchorage with her two young daughters, 8-year-old Melissa, 3-year-old Angie. Nancy had a second job. She not only was she a waitress at Gwenny's, but she was also a certified public accountant at H&R Block
Oh, wow.
to make ends meet.
Nice.
Yeah. On the evening of Friday, March 13th, 1987, Nancy went to dinner at Gwenny's along with her sister Cheryl and her brother-in-law. His name was Paul Chapman. Basically, she went to work, and then after work, they joined her, and they all sat and they ate. Now, Nancy and John's two daughters, Melissa and Angie, they had been taken to go swimming by Cheryl's daughter. Her name was Kelly. She was babysitting them. Kelly made them some food, took them swimming. Nancy, Paul, and Cheryl, they're at the restaurant for a while. And then Nancy decides to go home with Paul and Cheryl to her apartment. She lived in an apartment with her husband and her two daughters. They drove her home, and Paul said, if you need your car tomorrow, just let me know. I don't know if they were drinking. I don't know anything like that. But for some reason, she left her car at Gwenny's. All the adults came back home, and they just had coffee, and they smoked some cigarettes. And eventually Kelly came back with Angie and Melissa. And Angie and Melissa got ready for bed. Cheryl and Paul left. And it's about 10 o'clock at night. Nancy didn't have to work the next day. So she really wasn't worried about
going to bed or getting up early or something.
Having to get her car right away.
Yeah.
She didn't have to work. So this is Friday night. She didn't have to work until Sunday morning at 6 a.m. 8 a.m. on Sunday, Cheryl, Nancy's sister, gets a call from Nancy's boss. And I don't know why this is her boss's name.
Okay.
But they called her Mama Somerville.
Okay.
Mama Somerville. She's from Gwenny's. Nancy was 2 hours late for her shift, and that wasn't like her. She was very punctual. And her vehicle was still in the same spot as it was Friday night. This freaked Cheryl out and Paul. And Cheryl told Mama Somerville, I'll drive over to Nancy's apartment and I'll check on them. Cheryl and Paul drive over there. And Cheryl is so upset she can't even get, because she had a key to Nancy's place, she couldn't even get it in the lock. So Paul had to do it. Cheryl waited in the kitchen, freaking out, while Paul searched the house, or the apartment. He yelled for Nancy, and she didn't answer. They did notice the coffee cups from the night before were still in the sink.
Like from Friday night?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Friday night. Thank you. Paul begins searching the apartment, and he comes to a gruesome sight. And this is really hard to tell, so buckle up. 8-year-old Melissa in a room. She was found lying on her back in the middle of the bedroom on the floor. Her right arm was under her body, and her left arm was out to the side. Both of her legs were bent back at the knees. She was naked from the waist down, and her pajama dress was pulled up over her chest. A blue pillowcase was tied tightly around her neck, and there was a second pillowcase around her right wrist. So it was if at some point both of her wrists had been tied together, but at the point where Paul found her, there was just one wrist tied with a pillowcase. There was a pile of blood in her genital area.
I hate these stories.
I know. There was a palm print that would later be found on the wall above her headboard. In the next room, Paul found Nancy. She was laying on her mattress A pillowcase was tied tightly around her neck. Her nightgown had been pulled up over her breasts. Her face was bloody and beaten, and she was clearly dead. And a medical examiner would later determine she was raped. And so was Melissa. And I read conflicting things. One said that Melissa was raped with a blunt object, but I know that semen was found in her. So I don't know if there were two different forms of rape, but we'll just go on. When Paul opened the third door, it was even more horrific. It was just a 3-year-old, Angie. Yeah. She's laying on the floor covered in blood.
Oh, man.
She had, her jugular vein had been slashed through. Her carotid artery had been cut. She'd been cut from ear to ear, and she had 4 different cuts on her neck. Her nightgown had been pushed up around her chest.
This is so weird.
But again, there was conflicting accounts of whether she was sexually assaulted or not. There might have been an attempt is what I'm getting from it. Because I feel like if she was, I would have found it in the records.
Probably.
Angie had defensive wounds on her hand. And her cause of death was she bled out.
Oh, man.
The coroner estimated that all 3 were murdered approximately about 10 o'clock on Saturday morning. So Friday night is when Cheryl and Paul and babysitter Kelly, cousin Kelly, were over. Paul sees all this.
Man.
He stumbles to the kitchen and he tells Cheryl, don't go down the hall. They're all dead. He calls 911, and in the 911 calls, which I don't have, Cheryl can be heard just screaming in the background.
Oh, my God.
Now, a detective named Sergeant Mike Grimes, he was from the Anchorage Police Department's homicide response team. He led the investigation for the triple homicide. There were 2 separate teams of detectives working on the case. One was to gather the evidence from the crime scene, and the other one was to pursue any leads. I mean, I'm talking about right away. They split up. Some are interviewing neighbors, others are looking at the crime scene. For weeks, forensics actually went over Nancy's apartment.
Wow.
For weeks. There was so much blood, hair, fluids, fingerprints. They use this, what is it when they have glue that they heat up? And it goes,
like super glue to bring fingerprints out?
They did that.
I don't know what it's called, but yeah, I've heard of that.
They vacuumed the apartment, and then they had found out that Nancy had borrowed a vacuum from the Chapmans, so they took the vacuum from a couple days earlier, and they went through all that. They're trying to accumulate evidence, and they find hairs, fibers, they package them all, and they sent it to the FBI. When the police first got there, they noticed there were 2 cereal bowls in the sink. There was a coffee cup on the table, 3 in the sink. And that was a sign to them that the girls had awoken Saturday, and they normally had cereal and watched cartoons.
Oh, yeah.
While Nancy smoked her Marlboro Reds and had coffee.
The morning cigarette.
Yes, had coffee. Now, when Nancy would work, she would take all her coins and she would put it in a cookie tin. You know, the ones like at Christmas, the tins. But she would roll them up, nickels, dimes into the little...
Like the paper wrappers?
Yeah, remember those days? Mm-hmm. That was empty. They found that, and that was empty. And that's where she kept all of her tips that were coins. Also missing from the apartment was her purse, her jewelry, her husband John's keys, a checkbook, a wallet, and a high-priced, a very expensive, at the time, 35mm camera. But despite what was taken, it didn't look like the place was ransacked. It looked like whoever was there knew where the items were that he or she wanted.
Okay.
You know what I mean? They're not searching. There's drawers aren't open. Things aren't turned upside down, anything. The evidence collected told a horrible story of torture and sexual assault.
Oh, man. Talia, torture? Yeah. Oh, man. Okay.
Okay. I'm not going to get all that into it just because it is with a child and I can't. I am a human being, believe it or not, even though I'm a lawyer.
Nancy, even though we're dead inside, right?
Still a little bit.
There's a little bit.
Spark. Yeah. Still a little spark in me.
There's a little piece still left.
Nancy had been badly crushed in the face with some blunt object. I mean, just beaten and then strangled with a pillowcase. Interestingly, on her dresser, they found green wool gloves. Right? Like,
isn't it summertime?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gloves. A pair of gloves. Her sheets were blood-stained, and there was some fecal matter on it.
Okay.
There was blood observed on the bathroom light switch. And in the bathroom, they found a damp washcloth that had been used to clean the sink, the mirror, and the toilet area. Forensic technicians discovered one pubic hair on the washcloth. Now, Melissa's body was, how do I say this? She was the one that seemed to be the focus.
Oh.
And it's very heartbreaking for me. They found 13 pubic hairs on or around her body, in addition to some extra head hair that didn't match any of the victims. And they found pubic hair on her bed sheets. On 3-year-old Angie, the killer left one pubic hair, which is why I'm led to believe he at least attempted to rape her. There were 2 more foreign pubic hairs that turned up when they vacuumed the floors, bringing the whole range of pubic hairs to 20.
Damn. Okay.
He's shedding a lot of pubic hairs.
I guess.
What the heck?
Man.
The killer had staged the bodies. Remember I told you Melissa's legs were bent and the other ones were splayed out. So the police knew they were dealing with a psychopathic, sexual sadist. This is somebody fucked up.
Yeah, big time.
This is really fucked up. Sergeant Grimes consulted with the FBI's behavioral science unit, specifically Agent Judson Ray. And this is what Judson Ray concluded. He felt the killer would have low self-esteem. He would feel rejected by society for years, and that now was his time for revenge. He was likely the youngest of his siblings.
I wonder how they can figure this out.
I don't know.
It's fascinating to me. Okay. Sorry, sidetrack.
It's so weird.
Yeah, it is.
This person probably also experienced a recent traumatic event, such as a breakup or loss of a job. And the killer would appear to be cooperative with the police and probably try to interject himself into the investigation. They believe he would have a history of sexual assault against either young people or elderly people.
Oh, like helpless people.
Yes.
That's real nice.
He was white, an underachieving male, probably between the ages of 19 and 24. Like, what?
Yeah.
How do you know? How do you know all of this? Who lived nearby. And Agent Ray, he believed that the family probably knew who it was. And perhaps they had rejected him. He specifically Nancy. He based that on the fact that her face was just beaten to a pulp.
Okay.
Which means someone's trying to annihilate her identity, basically. He also speculated that the killer's goal was to humiliate Nancy and the girls. He would probably have a hard time in relationships and maintaining even menial jobs.
Because he's a fucking creep. So anyway, yeah, that's probably why.
With that description, one person rose to the top of the suspect list. His name was Kirby Anthony. He's 23 years old, and he was a nephew of John Newman.
Oh, Cheryl's husband.
Yes.
Okay.
He had moved to Anchorage, Alaska with his girlfriend, Debbie Heck, from Idaho. He was from Twin Falls in 1985. The reason why he moved is there were allegations against him that he had brutally raped a 12-year-old girl and beaten her almost to death. Her name was Michelle.
Wow.
At an Idaho campground. And he basically left her for dead, but she was found. Prosecutors found by her a pair of flip-flops. And they heard from other people that a group of guys had been partying in that area. So they ended up, I don't know if it was through the news or what, but somehow through the flip-flops, connected it to Kirby. They were actually Kirby's friend's flip-flops that he borrowed. So police were investigating Kirby. The problem that they had was that this girl, Michelle, had been so brutalized that she had suffered some brain injury.
Oh, yeah.
So she couldn't identify her attacker immediately. So he skips town with his girlfriend and goes to Alaska while they're investigating him. And just as a little side note, Kirby did admit to burglarizing the home in 1982 of an elderly woman. So this is a prior crime he committed. And I will get into his background a little bit. He beat this woman who was in a wheelchair.
Man.
What the fuck?
What is his problem?
In a wheelchair. He sprayed her with mace in her face, tied her up, and took her phone so she couldn't call anybody. And then he robbed her. Luckily, her son had came to visit her, and that saved her life. So let me give you a little background on Kirby.
This gem.
His parents, he was the youngest of five, just like the profiler had said, he'd probably be the youngest. He was the youngest of five. His dad was a truck driver, and his mom was a waitress. Her name was Peggy. I don't remember his dad's name. But his dad wasn't very nice. His dad one time beat his brother for not feeding the cat. And while he was beating Kirby's brother, Kirby's mom tried to intervene. So he started beating Kirby's mom, Peggy, and he kicked her in the ribs, and she crawled into the bedroom, and he came after her, and she grabbed a gun, and he's like, "What are you going to do? Just go ahead, shoot me." So she did.
Oh. She
shot him in the hip.
Wow.
And he drove himself to the hospital.
Damn.
And he survived. His younger years, there's so many crimes, so I will just stick to the more interesting ones. There is a really disturbing incident that happened. He had a girlfriend, I believe her name was Kim, and he took Kim to a bridge where he had a bunch of friends there, and his friends had baby bunnies in a box.
Oh, no.
And they were going to light the bunnies on fire.
What? And
throw them over the bridge. Kim started crying, and Kirby's like, "Oh, no, 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 no." And he acts like a hero, and he takes her home. And guess what he does?
He kills the bunnies?
Goes back to the bridge.
Oh.
lights the bunnies on fire with his friends, alive, and throws them over the bridge.
People are fucking sick. God.
Kim broke up with him, and he spent years stalking her.
Oh, God. Poor Kim.
Even when she was married, he was still stalking her.
This happened in Idaho, right?
Yes.
These crimes? Okay.
Mm-hmm. So he's having all these troubles, and he goes to Anchorage with his girlfriend, Deb. And they get odd jobs. He works at a car wash, just some small jobs for a few months. And then they end up moving in with Nancy and John Newman.
Okay.
Because they told Nancy and John, and this is true, that they had gotten a job at the Arctic Enterprise. And that is a boat which also has a facility on it or a factory where, like, as soon as fish are caught, you can clean them right on the boat. But they also take the boat out for long periods of time. So they stay there for a little bit. They sell their possessions.
Because they're waiting to get on this boat?
Yeah, they're waiting
for the season to start or something?
Right, exactly. And then Nancy and John did not enjoy their company, so you know. They found Kirby to be aggressive and that he did drugs. I don't know what kind of drugs. I do know cocaine, probably weed. I don't know anything else. But eventually Deb and
Kirby,
thank you. They go on the boat. They go on the Enterprise. And Kirby's girlfriend, she really wanted to go on that ship because she was being abused. And she felt if she was surrounded by other people, he wouldn't be able to abuse her. And she wanted to break up with him.
Oh, yeah, it's best to be around other people because she probably knows what a psycho he is. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
She breaks up with him on the boat, and he doesn't like that so much. But then she starts dating somebody.
Oh, girl, no.
And he really doesn't like that. He ended up getting fired because he started fights. So he got kicked off the boat.
So that's the traumatic event.
And he lost his girlfriend.
Yeah.
He goes back to Anchorage, and he shows up at Nancy's apartment, and he asks if he can stay, with
Nancy and the girls?
Yeah, while John's away in California.
Oh, no.
Nancy says, okay.
Oh, she's so nice.
But when she told John was like, oh, hell to the no.
Right.
Get him the fuck out. So Nancy had to kick him out.
Oh, boy.
She didn't tell John that she had loaned him $500. And by the way, Kirby's mom never bothered to share with Nancy and John the fact that he was being looked at for...
Oh, for the 12-year-old?
The rape and attempted murder of a 12-year-old.
That's nice. No, she was just happy he was gone, I'm sure,
probably.
Right?
Kirby, on the night of the murders, he claims that entire evening, before March 13th, he was playing cards, drinking, using some cocaine until the early morning hours.
As one does.
Yeah. What? What?
I don't know.
Tanya doesn't.
I've never done cocaine in my life, but go on.
I have no comment. I don't talk about those things. Okay. Around 8:45 a.m. on March 14th, he said he left his apartment and went to a friend's house, and he was there until about 10 or 11 in the morning. And that is the morning of the murders. Question is, how could anybody do this? How could anybody do this? How could anybody do this that knows?
Yeah, right? Because he's a
his
psychopath.
family, and we're talking about 8 and 3-year-old.
Right.
I mean, not to forget about Nancy, but detectives weren't convinced with his alibi, but they had no direct evidence at that point to arrest him. There was no murder weapon ever recovered because he did remember use a blunt force object.
Right. On Nancy.
Yeah. But there's circumstantial evidence started building up. But then he could explain it away as, I lived with them.
Oh, that's true, right?
That's why my fingerprints are here.
My hair, right? My whatever. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But his fingerprints were found on the empty cookie tin.
Cookie tin, yeah.
And
you shouldn't be touching that, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't belong to him.
A witness came forward and said that Kirby paid for something with rolled up coins.
Oh, yeah.
But this is where it's like, it's just going to get really gross. Pubic hairs that were collected. Remember I told you?
Yep, about the 20 of them.
And the washcloth had a pubic hair on it. Those hairs were examined microscopically, and they were compared to samples that Kirby had to give. And we all know hair evidence isn't all that solid, right?
Right. I'm just thinking the poor person that has to collect the evidence. But go on. Like, what a job.
Okay. Clinging to some of the pubic hairs were crabs, otherwise known as pubic lice eggs.
Oh, man.
Their casings.
Oh, these poor.
They were found on Kirby at the time. He had a whole pubic lice
infestation. I'm sorry. This is
the next
fucking
word
disgusting.
I was going to say. And they were found on the washcloth. There was one, and by the bodies.
Coincidence? I don't think so. On the bodies, too.
So horrible. It's awful.
Gross.
Green wool fibers were discovered on the washcloth that matched the gloves, and that were, in Nancy's room. And as I said, he eventually said, "Oh yeah, I didn't tell you this, but he eventually said, "Oh yeah, I brought the gloves over a week earlier. I was doing some work on the house, or a couple days earlier, and I left them there." So he actually admitted
that they were his
gloves. They concluded, he
fucking did it.
He did it.
Circumstantial evidence is still evidence.
Yeah.
It doesn't always have to be a positive DNA test.
Right.
What's the probability that there's another person who knows the family, even a stranger, let's just say,
who also has a history of
violence,
and violence,
and also
to a child.
has pubic lice. What are the odds? I would think that would narrow down quite a few people.
So fucked up.
I don't know. I don't know what the statistics are, but
they happened to find John Newman's expensive 35 millimeter camera in where he was staying at a friend named Dan's house.
Oh, well, there's another piece of evidence.
He said Nancy let him borrow it.
Sure she did.
John said there's not a chance in hell Nancy would let anybody borrow it. It was expensive. It was expensive back in 1985. And when they processed the film in there, it only showed pictures of Nancy and John and the family. So if he really needed a borrow camera, he never used it.
Yeah.
He never used it.
Yeah, she's not going to just let anybody take it, especially some irresponsible 19-year-old.
They found a very small drop of human blood on the toe area of one of his shoes and a stain on his shirt that matched Nancy's feces.
Oh, man.
But they didn't do DNA. So it just must have been fecal matter. Because at this point, they didn't have DNA.
No, they didn't.
But they had enough, right?
Yeah.
Kirby decides, oh, shit, I need to get the hell out of Dodge.
Oh, he tries to flee?
So he tries to flee. He tells his roommate, hey, I'm going to leave. Don't tell the police.
Yeah, don't tell them where I went.
And his roommate, again, his name was Dan, was pretty freaked out by Kirby at that point. And he was afraid for himself. So he waited a few hours and then he was like, hello, police.
Yes. 911. Hello.
Kirby is headed to the Canadian border. And it's kind of a long story. He made it past the border, but he had a suspended license. So they sent him back and he got caught. And his trial was a very high profile trial.
Oh, I bet. This is a horrendous story.
It's
I
horrible,
can imagine.
right?
It's like, I'm sure it was sensationalized.
And John Douglas testified.
He did.
Special Agent John Douglas from the FBI.
Nice. He has. I keep seeing him pop up like on my Facebook or Instagram.
Do you want to be your friend?
No. He does a master class. Like,
I want to take it.
You can join this, I guess, I don't know, his company or whatever, and they have master classes, and there's all kinds of people on it. Like the Wolfgang Puck does like cooking, and like, so John Douglas does a whole course, I guess you would call it, on like how to spot liars and stuff. I've been wanting to do it.
I gotta watch it, and then I'm gonna watch you.
I know.
I don't know. John Douglas said, if she looks at me like that.
Every time I hear his name, I'm like, oh, I need to sign up for that master class.
Yeah, you didn't tell me about that before.
I know. I forget. Please. I forget everything.
I forgot Kirby's name.
Well, I'm telling you now. So
in one of the episodes, I asked what happened to the
killer.
And then I forgot that he died in the story. He was shot. Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm sorry. That's sidetrack. But John Douglas testified.
He testified, and he said that the Newman murders were sexually fueled murders, which are committed by psychopaths. He said, and I'm not quoting him verbatim, but sex-fueled murders are some of the most disturbing and psychologically depraved crimes committed by people with severe psychopathic problems. These crimes are more than just murder. They are done to get sadistic pride from the prolonged torture, sexual violation, and absolute dominance over their victims. At their center, sex-fueled murders are driven by a malignant narcissism and a complete loss of empathy.
Oh, so
they no longer view others as people worthy of dignity, but simply as objects to be controlled, defiled, and in the long run, killed for their own gratification. I'm not done. The buildup of sadistic sexual fantasies over time leads to the offender's reality being separated from their moral reasoning. I don't think Kirby had a lot of moral reasoning.
He's only 19, too.
No, he's 23.
Oh, he's 23. Okay. But, geez.
The crime scenes of sex-fueled murders reflect the psychological duality of sexual depravity mixed with a need for general power and cruelty. They often pose their victims, elaborate staging, and he goes on and on.
Man.
And these calculated acts are done by sane people who are conscious that their actions are wrong, but lack the ordinary judgment of right and wrong or feel regret. That's what he had to say. So there's trial. Kirby takes a stand.
Oh.
He does himself no favors. There's no point even talking about the stupid shit he says because he does himself no favors. The jury,
he just says he didn't do it, right?
Yeah.
In a nutshell, he didn't do it.
He didn't do it.
Yeah.
He
wasn't me.
Would never do that.
No.
The jury deliberated. They weighed all the evidence, and he was found guilty.
Thank goodness.
Yeah. He got life in prison with the possibility of parole.
Really?
After 120 years.
Oh.
So he ain't got nowhere. This, sparked our outrage in Anchorage, Alaska. I mean, everybody was upset. Kirby had to be in solitary confinement because of death threats. And then I read about him. He's still in prison and he's been in fights. He actually has an appellate case about some altercation.
What, his rights are being denied or some shit?
No, it was about he severely assaulted somebody. So let's see. So, okay, do you want to know what police believe happened?
Yes.
Okay. They believe that Saturday morning, the kids got up, Nancy got up, she gave them cereal, they watched the cartoons. About 9 o'clock, Kirby called Nancy and asked if he could talk to her. She said, okay, because there's no sign of him breaking in or anything. And there was an ashtray. In that ashtray, I told you there were a Marlboro cigarette, and then there was a Camel. And he smoked Camel cigarettes. Kirby did. There's an extra cup of coffee. There were 3 in the sink from the night before. Right. Extra cup of coffee. Sometime between 9 and 10, after he finished a cigarette, he got mad. And he made Nancy go in her room. He made everybody go in the room. And I don't know how he controlled them. I don't know. But he had some sort of blunt force object that they never found. It is really sad. He did later state to a woman who came forward that he forced Nancy to watch him rape Melissa.
How do you force someone to do that?
Well, Melissa was tied up.
Yeah.
And I don't know if he had a weapon.
Yeah,
you got a daughter all tied up. You got I'm assuming she didn't have access to a phone.
That breaks my heart. That's really terrible.
And I don't know if he was threatening to kill.
Yeah, to kill her, Melissa.
Right. I can only speculate. Oh. That's just what somebody came forward and said. He later said, we know he raped Nancy. He took his time with Melissa, which leads me to believe that maybe Nancy was there because he was trying to torture Nancy in essence by torturing Melissa and having her watch. When he was done, he went to the bathroom, took a washcloth, cleaned himself up, cleaned the sink a little bit, cleaned around the toilet, stole some items, and then went about his day.
Like nothing happened.
And he still claims his innocence.
Sure.
But he's in prison.
Yeah, he can fuck off.
He can totally fuck off. Yeah. And so that is the horrible, horrible story.
Oh, Talia, Jesus.
That was horrible.
God.
I know.
That was terrible. I mean, they're all terrible stories. I know I've said this 100 times, but.
When it's kids.
Damn, man. And just. And such a horrible, like.
You can sometimes understand crimes of passion, like the heat of passion. You're angry.
Yeah.
Your lover just left you.
Right.
You freak out, whatever. Or your lover has another lover. But this?
Yeah, there's no sense.
There's no sense in it.
Like when there's no sense to it, I mean, yeah, because I mean, like you can understand some other crimes, like, oh, somebody's robbing a bank and they shoot and kill a police officer, or you know what I mean? There's murders where you're like, oh, I see how that happened. Like,
but there were signs.
Not that it's right, but yeah,
there were signs. The bunnies,
the bunnies,
and I didn't even get through his whole childhood. He was in the juvie by the time he was 14.
I mean, attacking a 12-year-old. I mean, almost killing her,
leaving her for dead.
Yeah, leaving her for dead. I mean, the girlfriend,
a woman in a wheelchair, an elderly woman in a wheelchair,
her
tied.
Too, yeah, like he should have been off the streets, but man, this one's bad. Well, thanks, I guess. Thanks, Talia.
You're welcome. Thank you guys all for taking the time to listen to us. And if you want to get another episode weekly that is ad-free and exclusive to our Apple subscribers or our Patreons, you can go to patreon.com/TNT Crimes or subscribe on Apple Podcasts, and you get this episode released early and ad-free, plus you get an additional episode only you and an exclusive group of people we love get. And we have Facebook, but we're not really social media active.
No, I'm not an expert. Yeah, I'm busy.
I'm busy. I mean, I don't know how to do it, but I'm busy. I got a job.
Got kids.
I got kids. I got a dog and I got cats. And
yeah, you're like Dr. Doolittle at your house.
It's a zoo at my house, and the monkeys are running it. Literally. I'm not kidding.
Yeah. We have a website, crimesandconsequences.com.
Yeah, you can get merchandise there.
Yep. And I think that's probably everything
good enough
worth
for me.
mentioning. So
I'm fine with all that.
yeah, until our next episode.
Don't kill each other.
Bye.
Bye.